Hello, Pastor Vince with Clergy in Support of the Second Amendment. Today I want to talk to you about the possibility of the blue states defying the upcoming Supreme Court ruling in the New York City or the New York Kerry case. Let me say up front that I hope I'm wrong about this, but I think there's a very good chance that the states will decide simply to defy the Supreme Court and dare them to enforce their ruling. I don't want that to happen. I think it'd be a terrible precedent to set, but I think that's possibly what's going to happen. Of course, anybody who's followed this case knows it's going to go way beyond concealed carry. It actually is going to affect the standard of review for Supreme Court case, well, all federal cases involving the Second Amendment, and it's going to set it at a much higher standard. The reason we know this is both sides agreed in oral arguments that higher standard should be the standard. And that standard is probably going to result, well, it's certainly going to result, if it's applied by the lower courts, to the striking down of assault weapons bans, the striking down of magazine limits, and as we've seen in two recent cases, the striking down of age limits above the age of 18 for the purchase of long guns, and who knows, possibly even handguns. So, you think they don't know about this? This is from the New York Review. The court's ruling could also change the test the courts use to determine the constitutionality of different types of gun laws, increasing the weight courts give to past historical practice. They know exactly what's going to happen after this ruling comes down, if it's followed. They know that most of their gun laws, I would say about 90% of state gun laws, will fall. Now, the leadership in states like New York, California, and New Jersey they're just rabidly anti-gun, rabidly anti-Second Amendment. And they've got plenty of support in the press. Again, from the New York Review, the title of the article I pulled that quote from is "The Remaking of the Second Amendment," as if interpreting the right of the people to keep and bear arms means that the people have a right to keep and bear arms is somehow reinterpreting it. Because what it should say is that the states have a right to arm and organize militias, and that's it. That's where we're at, folks. To where interpreting a constitutional amendment as simply what it says is, what did they say? Remaking it. Then they went on to listen to this. The Supreme Court's expanding interpretation of the Second Amendment threatens long-standing democratic authority to enact gun safety measures. Now, when people put together headlines, they're smart about it. They put words together that they want the people to associate in their minds. Listen to this one. Threatens and safety. They're supposed to come away from that saying, this ruling is going to threaten your safety. In fact, it's a threat to democracy. It's going to cause people to die. And just in case you think that's not what they're saying, consider this headline from Vanity Fair. The Supreme Court is set to issue an insane ruling that will lead to more dead Americans. And then they placed it under the heading mass shootings, because we know that so many mass shooters have been stopped because they did not have a carry permit. Then there's this from the New York City mayor. This keeps me up at night. Adams warns looming SCOTUS gun ruling could wreak havoc. This is exactly what the current leadership in California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and probably some other states actually believe about guns and gun rights. That if we have them, we're going to wreak havoc. So that cannot happen. And they've got a lot of support from the people in these states, unfortunately. Now, if you really believe that, and even more important, if your people that support you and vote for you believe that, just what would you do? Think about that. Well, the governor of New York has some comments on it. He says, She says, on concealed carry, we are working with our legal team, our policy team, as well as advocates like Everytown. Oh, surprise, surprise! Drawing on people who have been studying our options for quite some time, since this case was determined to be a case before the Supreme Court this year. So in other words, they've been trying to figure out what to do. She goes on. I'm not going to say now what we are going to do, because I have to see what the rationale is for whatever decision they come down with. That's absurd. She already knows. Everybody who listened to the oral arguments already knows what the decision is going to be. And they know that it's going to expand Second Amendment protections like they should be, put them to where they should be, and it's going to come down against their concealed carry restrictions. Everybody knows that, but she says, I don't know. I need to see that first. I also have no intention of telegraphing a strategy to the Supreme Court, because they're the enemy, of course. The Supreme Court of the United States is the enemy, and we wouldn't want to let them know what we're going to do. That the state of New York may be considering, because I believe it will be counterproductive when the decision is ultimately issued. In other words, we don't want the Supreme Court to get any clue as to what we're going to do, because they'd probably put that into the decision and tell us we couldn't do it. That's what she's saying. That's why she's keeping her strategy quiet. The only problem is that this decision is probably not going to leave room for them to stop citizen carry unless they simply decide to outright defy the court. Unless you think no one has thought of defying the Supreme Court recently, consider this gem, which was reprinted in newspapers across the entire nation and on websites. Just Google it. Editorial. The day could be approaching when Supreme Court rulings are openly defied. This is a major metropolitan newspaper threatening to defy Supreme Court rulings. Let's look a little deeper. They say various states, including Missouri, are already sidestepping federal marijuana laws, legalizing the use of the drug, even though the federal government outlaws marijuana as a Schedule I drug equivalent to heroin, LSD, and methamphetamine. A steady stream of states, starting with Colorado, decided to defy the federal government to the point where federal authorities make minimal efforts to enforce their own laws these days. They even mention this. Missouri has taken its defiance a step further by asserting the right to forbid police from enforcing any federal gun laws that don't have a companion Missouri state law, and I'm surprised they didn't mention all of the immigration sanctuary states where the local authorities are forbidden from enforcing or assisting in the enforcement of our immigration laws. There's only one problem. In all of those cases, the issue is not the legality of a state law under the Constitution. The issue is whether or not state and local law enforcement can be compelled against the wishes of the state to enforce federal laws. The answer to that question is that the Supreme Court has said, no, they can't. And that's why the federal government, if they want to enforce their gun laws, their marijuana laws, or their immigration laws, has to send federal law enforcement into these states to do that. And none of these states are stopping that from happening. So no one is defying the Supreme Court here. No one is violating federal law here. But then they get to the real point. The Supreme Court has no police force or military command to impose enforcements of its rulings. Until now, the deference that the states have shown was entirely out of respect for the court's place among the three branches of government, and for the fact that if you didn't follow the ruling, there was a very good chance you'd end up in federal prison. They don't mention that. If states choose simply to ignore the court following a Roe reversal, and no, this is not about abortion. This editorial was not about abortion. I'll explain why in a minute. Justices will only have themselves to blame for the erosion of their stature in Americans' minds. In other words, let them rule any way they want. We'll just ignore them. Let them enforce their rulings. I seem to remember that the Trail of Tears happened after a U.S. president said, a Democrat, by the way, a U.S. president said, they've made their ruling, now let's let them enforce it, and then defied the Supreme Court. So it's not the first time this has happened. The irony here is that the states have absolutely nothing to worry about when it comes to abortion. They can do anything they want. The Supreme Court is simply saying there is no federal constitutional right to abortion, and they are not saying it's illegal. They are not saying personhood belongs at birth, as much as some of us would like that to be the case. It isn't. This is not about abortion, and they know it. They're not that stupid. This is about gun rights. This editorial is about preparing people for the states defying the Supreme Court on guns. So what would happen if New York and California just told the Supreme Court to get lost? We're going to do whatever we want. What if they decided to continue enforcing their laws even after the Supreme Court said they were unconstitutional? What if they said to their people, we must do this because people will die unless we defy the Supreme Court? Well, it's going to be a legal mess. It's going to be a legal mess. Of course, people who are convicted under these laws, if the state courts choose to convict them, those people are going to appeal to the federal courts, and probably a lot of them will get out. But in the meantime, they've got legal bills, and in the meantime, they're just not issuing permits. And you go back to the federal courts, and the state says we're still not going to do it, and it's going to be a legal mess. Here's my concern. As long as Congress is controlled by Democrats and President Biden occupies the White House, then I don't see the Biden DOJ enforcing this ruling, no matter what the courts tell them to do. I think they will say, no, not going to do it. And as long as Democrats control Congress, then we're not going to be able to have Congress intervene either. They could cut off funding. There's a lot of things Congress could do in this case, but they're not going to do it unless the Republicans take back the Congress. So I'm hoping this doesn't happen. I really am. But I think there are people who definitely want it to happen, and I think they're going to try and do it. And again, I sure hope I'm wrong. Please consider like, comment, subscribe, and thanks a lot.